The galaxy, in those years, was radiant with life. From the coreward capitals to the rimward outposts, starlands blazed like rivers of fire, carrying ships heavy with cargo, laughter, and hope. It was an age when the hum of engines was the pulse of civilization, and the glow of 1,000 worlds shimmered against the endless night. Merchants spoke of prosperity, as though it were an endless harvest. Fleets of freighters drifted across the void like silver caravans, their holds filled with rich as crystals mined from the hearts of dying stars. Spices distilled from the atmospheres of exotic worlds and technology so advanced it bordered on sorcery. Across the galaxy, no planet seemed too distant, no frontier too wild. The galaxy lived in motion, always moving, always exchanging, always breathing. And yet it was not only wealth that defined the age. Peace, fragile though it always was, held firm. Alliances stitched together species that once warred bitterly. The once hostile Kyrene of the spiral fringes now traded freely with their former enemies, offering biological marvels in exchange for ores and ships. The humanoid colonies of the Inner Arm opened their academies to alien students, and in return, learned songs older than Earth's mountains. It was an age where boundaries softened, and bridges of trust spanned the stars. Artists and thinkers spoke to audiences scattered across light years. Their words carried faster than suns could rise and fall. There was music in the stars, literally so. For ships sailing the deep often broadcast symphonies into the void, filling the silence with the sound of civilizations daring to declare, "We are here, we endure." Children born in that era grew up, believing in a future without war. To them, the galaxy seemed like a festival without end, markets glittering with alien wares. Orbital cities lit with neon rivers, skies above desert planets filled with the shimmer of incoming freighters. They watched fleets soar overhead and saw not armies, but lifelines. It was easy, in those golden years, to believe that the galaxy was untouchable, that its brilliance was eternal. Nothing could smother the fires of life that burned across the constellations. But empires fall not in a single night, nor in a single battle. They falter first with whispers, with shadows that slip unnoticed into the corners of bright halls. Even then, in the warmth of prosperity, few captains swore they had glimpsed such shadows in the depths between the stars. Most dismissed them. Superstitions, born of long journeys and lonely watches. The mind, after all, was prone to illusions when surrounded by nothing but endless black, we say. You had seen a shadow in the void was not so different than sailors of old claiming. Monsters lurked beneath the oceans. Who would listen? And yet, the stories persisted. A freighter returning from the Orion Spur reported a phantom signal, something vast trailing their ship, just beyond the reach of sensors. They said its outline was wrong, jagged, almost horned in shape. Another convoy swore they'd heard whispers through their coms, though no transmission had been logged. Small tales easily dismissed, easily laughed away. But there was a peculiar thing about such stories. They clung to memory. Pilots repeated them in the cantinas of orbital stations. Traders muttered them under their breath as they signed new contracts. Scholars dismissed them in lectures, yet their students always remembered. Shadows in the void. Ships that appeared, then vanished. Strange symbols scrawled onto recovered wreckage, their origins unknown. Even so, life pressed on. Prosperity drowned out fear. The galaxy was far too vast, far too luminous, for whispers to dim its light on Earth, that ancient cradle of humankind. The age was felt as a renaissance unlike any before. The blue planet had finally risen to claim its place as an equal among the stars. Cities gleamed with glass spires, oceans shimmered with orbital mirrors, and the scars of old wars had been healed by shared purpose. Earth's scientists were sought after, its culture respected, its people proud. Children studied not only their own history, but the myths and truths of other worlds. Humanity had not only survived, it had learned to dream beyond itself. No one could know that those dreams would soon be tested by nightmares in the farthest corners of the galaxy. In the spaces where even maps dared not tread, something was stirring, It watched the light of a thriving civilization and hungered. It listened to the music broadcast into the dark and answered with silence. Where the galaxy declared, "We endure," something older whispered back, "Not for long." But in that golden age, such whispers were too faint, too distant to be heard. The people of the stars laughed, loved, and built, unaware that the void itself had begun to stir, for even the brightest dawn can cast the longest shadow, and in that shadow, unseen and patient, the phantom of the void waited. The golden age did not collapse in fire, not at first. Its ending began with a single silence. The first ship to vanish was the Aurora Dawn, a freighter from the wealthy colonies of Epsilon Eridani. It was vast, built like a floating city. Its holds stacked with goods worth more than empires, rare crystals from mining worlds, medicines harvested from alien jungles, and art carved by human and non-human hands alike. It left its port in a blaze of confidence, its departure watched by thousands. The journey it took was routine, one made countless times before, but the Aurora Dawn never arrived. At first, officials assumed a mechanical failure. Navigation errors did occur after all, and deep space was unforgiving. But when no debris was found, no beacon, no trace of wreckage drifting among the stars, unease spread. A ship of that size did not simply vanish. Families waited at the docks. Merchants demanded answers. Governments launched investigations, dispatching fleets to comb the trade route. Nothing. It was as though the ship had been swallowed by the void itself. The incident might have faded into mystery had it remained alone. But weeks later, another ship failed to arrive. Then another. The Starwind, a passenger liner carrying nearly 2,000 colonists, vanished after leaving the colony of Daltrax. Unlike the Aurora Dawn, it had time to send a signal. The captain's voice crackled through the relay stations, tight with terror. "It's here. Something's here with us. A ship. No, not a ship. It's wrong. It's watching us. God help us." The transmission ended in static. The Starwind was gone. Whispers began to spread across the galaxy. At first, they were dismissed as hysteria. Pirates, perhaps, or some unknown phenomenon. But the stories would not stop. The Helios, a science vessel, reported strange readings before it disappeared. The logs recovered from its last transmission spoke of a radar anomaly, an object, vast and horned in silhouette, drifting silently in the void. The crew described it as a ship, yet not a ship. Its hull glowed with faint crimson, etched with symbols no scholar could identify. Then, in the final entry, the recorder captured a single sound, a chorus of whispers overlapping, speaking in a language no one could understand. That was the last anyone heard from the Helios. In the space of a year, 17 ships vanished. Merchant guilds, once bold and proud, began to shutter their trade routes. Colonists grew afraid to leave their homeworlds. The starlands that once glittered with constant movement dimmed, as fewer ships dared to cross them. Fear spread faster than any news broadcast could contain. People began to give the phenomenon a name: the Phantom of the Void. At first, the name was spoken with nervous laughter, as though it were no more than a sailor's tale. But each new disappearance fed the legend. Survivors of fleeting encounters swore they had seen ships unlike any built, by known hands, jagged, monstrous, shaped like the faces of demons. One crew described an immense vessel with 2 burning red eyes carved into its prow, staring at them before fading back into darkness. Another spoke of being surrounded by whispers. On every frequency, their navigation screens filling with spirals of red. They escaped, but 3 of their crew went mad, muttering endlessly about horns and shadows. Governments tried to reassure their citizens. Patrol fleets were increased. Convoys were given military escorts. Investigators announced theories. Black holes, rogue AI, unknown alien raiders. But none of these explained the vanishings. None of them answered the fear in the eyes of the people. Then came the Vanguard. The Vanguard was no freighter, no passenger liner. It was a warship, the Pride. Of the Terran fleet, armed with weapons capable of tearing moons apart, It was dispatched not to trade but to hunt. Its mission, to find whatever haunted the starlands and end it. For days, the Vanguard sailed silently through the outer sectors, its crew vigilant, sensors sweeping. Then the anomaly appeared. At first, just a faint blip, too large to be debris, too slow to be an asteroid. The captain ordered an intercept. As the Vanguard drew closer, the shape emerged, a vessel vast and terrible, its design warped wrong. Jagged horns jutted from its hull, and crimson symbols pulsed faintly along its length. Like veins of fire, the Vanguard opened fire. Plasma cannons roared, tearing through the void, striking the phantom ship again and again. Explosions blossomed across its hull, yet the vessel did not falter. Instead, it seemed to shimmer, its edges bending reality itself. The gunners swore their shots passed through it as though it were not fully there. Then the phantom answered, no weapon fire, no visible strike, just silence. In an instant, every system aboard the Vanguard died. Lights flickered out, engines stuttered to nothing. The life support failed. In the pitch-black corridors, crewmen shouted, panic rising. The emergency lights flashed once, just long enough for the captain to glimpse something on the deck. Before him, a figure, tall, cloaked in shadow, horned. The lights went out again. The Vanguard was never seen. The galaxy shuddered. If even a warship could not withstand the phantom, what hope did any of them have? Trade collapsed. Worlds withdrew into themselves, cutting off from their neighbors. Fear gnawed at the golden age like rot beneath the surface. Religious sects declared the phantom to be a punishment, a demon risen from the void. Scholars, desperate to rationalize, argued over whether it was a new species, a rogue machine, or a nightmare born of mass hysteria. But none of their words could undo what had been seen. The phantom was real. It was hunting them, and the golden age was ending. Fear had become the new currency of the galaxy. Where once the starlands glittered with endless traffic, now they lay half empty. As if the void itself had swallowed the courage of its travelers, the vanishings had shaken the foundations of prosperity. But what came next was worse. For now, the phantom no longer struck silently, it began to haunt. The freighter Eclipse Runner was the first to report it. The ship had been en route from the mining world of Cars with a hold full of titanium, its course routine and uneventful. Then its sensors detected something trailing them, faint signal at first, an anomaly that could have been dismissed as a ghost echo, but the anomaly grew sharper, clearer, until it resolved into a shape. The crew gathered at the observation deck, staring through reinforced glass as it emerged from the dark. It was a ship. And yet it was not. Its hull was jagged, twisted into shapes that no engineer would ever design. Horn-like protrusions jutted forward, and crimson lines pulsed faintly along its frame. As though it were alive, its blood glowing beneath its skin, it drifted closer without lights, without sound, without even the flare of engines. The captain gave the order to jump into hyperspace. The ship's systems engaged, the stars blurred, and the Eclipse Runner vanished into faster-than-light travel. But it never arrived. No wreckage, no distress signal, nothing. It was as if both the freighter and its phantom pursuer had been erased from existence. The story spread like wildfire. Soon, other ships began to report similar horrors. The Silver Horizon, a luxury cruiser carrying wealthy passengers through the Corward Belt, experienced a nightmarish event that left no survivors. Before its disappearance, it transmitted a series of fragmented signals. Passengers claimed to see shadows moving across their cabins, though the ship's internal scans showed nothing. Gravity shifted unpredictably, pulling people against walls, ceilings, floors, as if the vessel itself were twisting around them. Then the viewports went black not from shutters, but as if a curtain of void had been drawn across them. Outside, something pressed against the glass, thin shapes, tall, horned, watching. The cruiser's final message was an audio transmission filled not with screams but with whispers. Hundreds of overlapping voices chanting in a language no one understood. Then silence. Not long after, The science vessel Helios 2 went missing in the far rim. Recovery crews later found fragments of its hull drifting near a dead star. Inside, the walls were carved with spirals and jagged symbols, etched as though burned into the metal by unseen hands. The ship's log revealed the crew had docked with a derelict and ancient vessel floating aimlessly. They entered to investigate. Their voices grew frantic in the recordings. "Shadows are moving," one of them said. But the scanners show nothing. Another voice shouted about seeing a figure with burning eyes standing at the end of the corridor. Then static. The recovery team that found the fragments reported something stranger still. Each of them swore they heard breathing within the wreck. Rhythmic, slow, as though the phantom itself still lingered in those hollow halls. Fear turned to hysteria. Entire colonies began to shut down their ports. Merchant guilds, once proud, now refused to send ships beyond their own sectors. Pilots told stories in hushed voices at starports, of hearing voices whispering their names in the dark, of sensors detecting ships shaped like demons, of crewmen waking to see horned silhouettes at the edge of their bunks. Whether these stories were true or born of panic hardly mattered. The effect was the same. The galaxy was no longer safe. But the most chilling story came from the Orion transport, a colony ship carrying thousands of settlers toward a new homeworld. Its transmission lasted only minutes, but it seared itself into the memory of the galaxy. The video showed passengers crowded at the windows, pointing outward. Beyond them, filling the void, was a vessel shaped like a skull, its hollow sockets glowing red as if they were eyes. The transport systems faltered. The lights flickered, the image distorted. Then the camera captured something else: shadows. Spilling across the floor, stretching unnaturally, as though reaching for the passengers. The final frame was a blur of red light, and the sound of screams layered atop one another until it became unbearable static. The Orion transport vanished. Not a single survivor. That was the breaking point. No longer could governments dismiss the phantom as myth or hysteria. No longer could fleets pretend the disappearances were the result of pirates or anomalies. This was real, something intelligent, something deliberate, and worst of all, was growing bolder. The phantom no longer stalked the edges of trade routes or preyed on isolated ships. Now, it appeared near colonies at the fringes of populated sectors where billions could witness. Its presence, entire planetary skies turned red at night as symbols flickered like fire across the clouds. On one world, the moons themselves appeared to bleed, their surfaces glowing crimson for 3 nights before fading back to gray. Out. On another, a colossal, silhouette-horned, immense was seen walking across the stars, blotting out constellations as it moved. The galaxy trembled. Fear had become universal, and yet this was still only the beginning. The phantom had not yet revealed its true nature. Ships prowled the starlands. Its shadows haunted colonies. Its whispers infected the minds of the people. But the full storm had not yet broken. When it did, the golden age would shatter, and the galaxy would learn what it truly meant to be haunted. For months, the galaxy had whispered of the phantom as if it were a ghostly curse, a horror from the abyss that preyed on ships and swallowed lives. But ghosts leave no banners, no empires, no laws carved in iron and blood. The truth came suddenly, brutally, with the revelation. It began in the Meridian sector, a crossroads of commerce and culture. Dozens of inhabited worlds orbited its twin suns, their skies forever glowing in gold and crimson light. On the world of Chorus, farmers tended to their sprawling grain fields, while merchants in glittering robes filled the bazaars with scents of spice and precious metals. It was an oasis of prosperity, untouched by war for centuries. On the 3rd night of the lunar cycle, the skies above Chorus bled red at first. Citizens thought it a natural phenomenon. The auroras sometimes shimmered crimson when the solar winds danced. But this was no shimmering. This was a flood of scarlet that drowned the stars, staining the heavens as though the cosmos itself had been wounded. Then came the sound. Every radio, every communicator, every broadcast frequency across the sector erupted with a single, unearthly note, a low, resonant hum that pressed into the bones of every living being. It lasted for hours. Crops wilted under its vibration. Animals wailed in terror. And in the minds of the people, voices whispered, layered one upon another, chanting words no one could translate, but all could feel. They spoke of dominion, of surrender, of devotion to something vast and merciless. When the hum ceased, the sky tore open. From the red-stained heavens descended shapes, armadas of vessels unlike any ever seen. They were not fleets of steel and symmetry, but jagged horned silhouettes, their surfaces carved with living runes that pulsed like veins. Each ship glowed as if forged from fire, and their hulls writhed faintly as though they were alive. At the vanguard flew a colossal warship, shaped like a crown of horns circling a burning core. Its shadow fell across half the planet, and upon its prow burned a banner not of cloth, but of living flame that twisted into a symbol the galaxy would never forget: 2 black horns, piercing a crimson sun. The Phantom had a flag and a name. Across the ecoms a voice emerged, deep and thunderous, resonating in every language at once. The void is no ghost. The void is a kingdom. We are the dominion of the horned flame. You will kneel. You will forsake your false gods. You will abandon your possessions. All belongs to the dominion. All belongs to the flame. The ultimatum was simple: surrender and live as subjects, or resist and be consumed. Chorus resisted. Its defense fleets scrambled to meet the invaders, hundreds of gleaming ships surging upward to form a shield around their home. But their courage met a nightmare. The Dominion's fleets did not fight as machines of metal and fuel. They moved, like predators, weaving through fire with impossible grace. Their weapons were not lasers or missiles, but torrents of searing crimson light that tore through matter as if dissolving it into ash. Entire defense wings vanished in seconds. There, screams echoing across open channels before cutting to static. The battle lasted less than an hour. The capital city, Citadel Prime, burned as beams of light descended from orbit, turning towers to molten rivers. The twin suns dimmed as ash filled the atmosphere. Survivors fled into underground shelters, but even there the Dominion reached. Them, black-armored soldiers descended, oran-helmed, faceless behind masks that hissed with red smoke. They marched through fire without hesitation, weapons crackling with energy that reduced walls to dust. Resistance fighters who tried to stand were crushed. Citizens were herded into squares where the flames' banners were burned into the very stone, and the rules were spoken. No man or woman could hold private property. All belonged to the Dominion. No voice could speak of freedom, dissent, or rebellion. To do so was to vanish into the furnaces. No god but the flame could be worshipped. To invoke another name was to invite death. But there was a cruel allowance. Those who worshipped the horned flame or the Dominion's rulers were spared, while those who bowed were elevated as keepers, allowed to serve as priests of obedience. And those who whispered prayers to darker powers, chaos, shadow, demonhood, were strangely tolerated. The Dominion fed on corruption. It thrived on fear. Chorus fell. Then its neighboring worlds. Then the entire Meridian sector. Within a single month, whole constellations burned red. The Phantom, once thought to be a myth, had revealed itself as a vast empire spreading outward. Like a plague, panic consumed the galaxy. Governments shattered. Merchant guilds dissolved. Colonies begged for protection, but no fleet was strong enough. No alliance unified enough to resist. Yet in the chaos, one truth emerged. The Dominion was not unstoppable. Its ships, though terrifying, could be destroyed. Its soldiers, though merciless, could bleed. There were whispers of resistance cells, of scientists seeking ways to pierce the Dominion's unnatural technologies. And in the shadows of Earth, a world scarred by its own wars and reborn in defiance, a council gathered. Earth had not forgotten the lessons of struggle. Humanity, fractured and battered, had rebuilt itself through fire before. And now, as the Dominion's shadow spread closer, Earth prepared once more, not merely to survive, but to defy. The revelation was no longer the story of a ghost. It was the beginning of a war. It was a chain as strong as any soldier's grip. The people learned quickly. It was safer to worship the darkness than to resist it. But it was not only chorus. Entire sectors fell in too. This rhythm of terror. On the industrial world of Graxus, factories no longer produced goods for trade, but weapons for the Dominion. Children worked the assembly lines, their hands bleeding as they bolted together rifles and war machines. Overseers walked the aisles, electro-whips crackling, their horns silhouetted against the smoke. On Vera, once known as the Garden World, for its vast oceans and endless meadows, the Dominion turned paradise into prison. Fields became barracks, seas became testing grounds for living weapons that howled with voices not their own. The beauty of the world was harnessed, broken, enslaved, and across the galaxy. The people lived in silence. Fear was a language all understood now. No one spoke of freedom. No one dared dream of rebellion. The Dominion was everywhere, its fleets, blotting out the stars, its banners burning on every horizon, its laws carved into the flesh of every survivor. But whispers still lingered, in hidden corners. In the shadows of ruined temples, resistance sparked like embers in ash. A merchant who remembered the old ways, a soldier who refused to kneel, a scientist who scribbled forbidden notes on scraps of stolen paper. They spoke of hope, though only in breaths, as if the flame itself were listening, and always they spoke of one world Earth. For while the Dominion spread like a plague, Earth had not yet fallen. From afar people watched the blue world with awe and envy. Rumors drifted through smuggler channels and broken combs that Earth had built weapons unlike any seen before, that it was preparing in silence, that its people would not bend as others. Had some said Earth was already fighting? Its ships darting in and out of Dominion patrols, striking like shadows before vanishing. Others claimed Earth's leaders had sworn oaths to never kneel, no matter the price. And though the Dominion's propaganda dismissed these whispers as lies, the fear in their voices betrayed the truth, because if one world defied them, if one ember refused to be smothered, and perhaps the fire of rebellion could spread, the Dominion's rule was vast, merciless, and total. But it was not absolute, not yet. For even in the darkest void, the faintest star can burn, and somewhere beyond. The crimson fleets and burning banners, Earth prepared to rise. The galaxy lay under the Dominion's shadow, its skies stained crimson, its people broken into obedience. For many, hope was a forgotten relic, a word that no longer belonged to their tongues. Yet in silence, in shadows, and in hearts that refused to die, something stirred. It began not with armies, nor with grand declarations, but with small rebellions. On Chorus, a child slipped past Dominion patrols carrying a scrap of parchment. On it were words his mother had whispered to him before she was taken to the pyres. The flame is not eternal. The stars still burn. He hid the parchment in the ruins of a temple, where others found it, read it, copied it. Phrase had spread across the city, carved into walls in secret, scratched into ration crates, murmured in lines of the starving. A simple sentence, yet it burned brighter than the Dominion's banners. On Graxus, an overseer was found dead in a factory alley, his helmet shattered, his weapons stolen. The workers said nothing when questioned. No one had seen who had done it, but when the soldiers left, hundreds of grease-stained hands quietly tapped the same rhythm on the metal walls, a signal of unity. On Vera, fishermen whose boats had been seized sailed at night on makeshift rafts. They set fire to Dominion supply barges. The flames reflected across the once peaceful seas. The Dominion crushed them quickly, but not before their story spread. Whispered from world to world, they dared. These were not victories in the military sense. They were sparks. And sparks, scattered across dry fields, have a way of becoming fire. But the heart of the ember lay on Earth. Unlike the worlds that had surrendered, Earth stood in defiance. Its skies were scarred from battles long past nuclear wars, climate, collapses, civil strife. Humanity had endured its own darkness, and it had rebuilt in the ashes. Earth knew what it meant to be broken, and it knew how to rise again. When news of the Dominion's revelation spread, Earth did not bow. Its leaders, a fractured but unyielding council, had looked upon the crimson banners and declared one truth: never again shall chains bind this world. The Dominion tested Earth's resolve. Skirmish fleets descended, expecting easy conquest. They met resistance not in fleets of equal size, but in cunning. Earth's ships darted like wolves, striking supply lines, cutting communications, laying traps among asteroid belts. Their weapons, though fewer, were clever cannons hidden in orbital debris, EMP pulses that turned Dominion ships into drifting carcasses, swarms of drones programmed to tear through hulls like insects through flesh. The Dominion suffered losses it had not anticipated. For the first time, its fleets retreat, not in defeat, but in irritation, in recognition that Earth was no passive prey. Word spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, whispers became something more. Earth fights, they said in hushed tones. Earth resists. Earth bleeds, but it does not kneel. For oppressed worlds, this was not merely news. On chorus, hidden radios, tuned into pirate frequencies where Earth's defiance was broadcast. Families huddled together in darkened rooms, listening to voices speak of resistance, of battles won, of the possibility that the Dominion was not invincible. On Graxis, workers fashioned crude weapons from stolen scrap, whispering to one another, "If Earth can stand, so can we." On Vera, survivors of the Fishermen's Revolt carved Earth's symbol, the blue and green oribon, to the hulls of stolen boats, sending them adrift as beacons of defiance. But the Dominion was not blind. It saw the embers glowing, felt rebellion stirring, and like all tyrannies, sought to crush it before it could become flame. New decrees spread across the occupied sectors. For every whisper of resistance, 100 innocents would burn. For every symbol of Earth found, cities would be razed. The pyres grew taller, the screams louder, the shadows deeper. The Dominion poured terror like water upon sparks. And yet, the embers did not die. They spread faster. For every pyre that rose, for every life taken, 10 more voices swore vengeance, in hidden caves, in forgotten bunkers. In abandoned freighters drifting at the edge of space, resistant cells began to form. They had no central command, no grand strategy. They had only the fire in their chests, the hunger for freedom, and the knowledge that somewhere, Earth was fighting too, and within Earth itself, a name began to rise. A leader, not yet known to the galaxy, but whispered among the resistance. A commander, scarred by loss, forged in fire, carrying the weight of humanity's defiance upon their shoulders. A figure who would soon step from shadow into flame. The Dominion's rule was vast, its power unmatched, its cruelty boundless. But against it, the embers had begun to glow, and even the mightiest inferno fears the spark that will one day consume it. Every rebellion needs a voice. Every fire needs a spark. For months, the galaxy had whispered of resistance as rumor, as dream, as faint embers scattered across the dark. But an ember without wind dies. Cause without a leader fades into silence. The galaxy needed someone who would not whisper, but roar. Earth gave them such a figure. Her name was Commander Selene Arcturus. To her people, she was not born of legend, but of loss. She had grown up in the ruins of Earth's burned cities, in the shadow of collapsed towers where grass grew through shattered glass. Her childhood was not filled with books or games, but with the cries of refugees, the taste of ration bread, and the smell of ash that clung to her skin no matter how many times she washed. Her father had died in the last resource wars. Her mother in the pandemics that followed. Selene was raised by soldiers who had nothing to give her but discipline, and by teachers who had nothing to offer but truth. The world is cruel, but so are you if you let it break you. From that crucible, a commander was forged. By the time the Dominion revealed itself, Selene was already scarred by battles of Earth's making. She had led defense fleets against rogue nations that sought to claim dwindling resources. I'd built alliances between rival factions who once spat at each other across borders. She was not the strongest, nor the most brilliant. But she carried one thing the broken world could not live without: conviction. And when the Dominion came, with their crimson banners and horned ships, Selene was the one who refused to kneel. Her first victory was small, almost laughable compared to the might of the Dominion. A single Dominion frigate had descended into Earth's orbit, seeking to test humanity's defenses. Selene led a ragtag fleet of retrofitted mining vessels and outdated warships. Against all odds, they ambushed the frigate, tearing it apart. With a combination of sheer ferocity and clever traps, the galaxy might have ignored the battle. But Selene did not let them. She broadcast the victory across every channel she could hijack. Her face stern, her voice steady. "We are humanity. We are Earth, and we will never kneel to the horned flame. If you hear this, know that the Dominion can bleed. Know that they can burn. Know that we will fight, not just for ourselves, but for every world they've shackled." Her message spread like wildfire. Smugglers carried it across trade routes. Resistance cells replayed it in hidden chambers. Families whispered her name in secret: Arcturus. Some worlds called her the Iron Flame, others the Shadow of Earth. To the Dominion, she was a nuisance. To the oppressed, she was salvation. Selene had not anticipated. For the first time, its fleets retreat, not in defeat, but in irritation. It's in recognition that Earth was no passive prey. Word spread like wildfire. Across the galaxy, whispers became something more. Earth fights, they said in hushed tones. Earth resists. Earth bleeds, but it does not kneel. For oppressed worlds, this was not merely news. On chorus, hidden radios, tuned into pirate frequencies where Earth's defiance was broadcast. Families huddled together in darkened rooms, listening to voices speak of resistance, of battles won, of the possibility that the Dominion was not invincible. On Graxis, workers fashioned crude weapons from stolen scrap, whispering to one another, "If Earth can stand, so can we." On Vera, survivors of the Fishermen's Revolt carved Earth's symbol, the blue and green Oribon, to the hulls of stolen boats, sending them adrift as beacons of defiance. But the Dominion was not blind. It saw. The embers glowing, felt rebellion stirring, and like all tyrannies, sought to crush it before it could become flame. New decrees spread across the occupied sectors. For every whisper of resistance, 100 innocents would burn. For every symbol of Earth found, cities would be razed. The pyres grew taller, the screams louder, the shadows deeper. The Dominion poured terror like water upon sparks. And yet, the embers did not die. They spread faster. For every pyre that rose, for every life taken, 10 more voices swore vengeance, in hidden caves, in forgotten bunkers. In abandoned freighters drifting at the edge of space, resistant cells began to form. They had no central command, no grand strategy. They had only the fire in their chests, the hunger for freedom, and the knowledge that somewhere, Earth was fighting too, and within Earth itself, a name began to rise. A leader, not yet known to the galaxy, but whispered among the resistance. A commander, scarred by loss, forged in fire, carrying the weight of humanity's defiance upon their shoulders. A figure who would soon step from shadow into flame. The Dominion's rule was vast, its power unmatched, its cruelty boundless. But against it, the embers had begun to glow, and even the mightiest inferno fears the spark that will one day consume it. The galaxy had waited, trembling, for someone to rise against the Dominion. With Selene Arcturus at its helm, the resistance no longer whispered in shadows. It roared into the stars. The first great war began, not with a declaration, but with fire. Selene knew they could not face the Dominion in open battle. 2 pit fleets against fleets was suicide. The Dominion had centuries of conquests behind them. An endless armory of ships carved from nightmare, and soldiers bred for obedience. But even giants have wounds, and Selene understood where to strike. Supply lines, come relays, factories that fed the war machine. And so the resistance struck, across dozens of sectors. Ragged fleets appeared from the dark like wolves descending upon caravans. Freighters carrying Dominion weapons vanished in explosions. Refueling stations erupted in flames. On Graxus, workers sabotaged their own factories, turning Dominion rifles into useless shards. On Vera, fishing boats rammed into Dominion barges, detonating stolen charges that lit the seas with fire. It was not one battle, but 100 scattered across the galaxy. For the first time, the Dominion bled not from whispers, but from coordinated strikes. Selene commanded from the resolute dawn, her voice steady as she wove chaos into symphony. "Strike, vanish. Strike again," she ordered. "We are not there. Equal. We are their shadow, their teeth in the dark. Make them fear us." And fear they did. Dominion fleets scrambled, abandoning their steady advance to chase ghosts. Their admirals, proud and unyielding, grew restless as convoys burned and factories fell silent. Their propaganda no longer mocked the rebellion, seethed, naming Selene a plague, a disease, a fire that must be extinguished. But with each strike, the resistance grew bolder. The first true fleet battle came at the Ardent Nebula. The Dominion had gathered a convoy of warships to crush the uprising in the Outer Rim. Hundreds of crimson vessels moved together, their horns glowing in the light of the swirling nebula clouds. Selene had no fleet to match them, only 50 ships, patched together from scavenged parts and smuggler trades. But she had cunning. In the nebula itself, she lured the Dominion into its storm. As the Crimson Armada advanced, Selene's fleet darted through the gas clouds, masking themselves from scanners. Dominion ships fired wildly, their beams cutting swaths through the nebula. But each blast only illuminated their own silhouettes. Selene's ship struck from the mist, railguns tearing through holes, EMP bursts sending giants drifting powerless into the void. For hours the nebula lit with fire. Ship after ship erupted, scattering debris that glowed like dying stars. The Dominion roared with fury, but their formation fractured. Knowing the chaos, Selene drove her flagship straight into the heart of their fleet, targeting their command carrier. With a final barrage, the great crimson ship split apart, its burning wreckage drifting into the nebula like a bleeding beast. The resistance fled before the Dominion could regroup, leaving destruction in their wake. It was not total victory. Dominion still had more, but the battle became legend. The galaxy called it the Battle of Ghostfire Nebula, and with it, the war truly began. News of the victory spread faster than Dominion sensors could contain. On Chorus, children etched stars into the ash of ruined temples, chanting Selena's name. On Grax's, workers sang as they sabotaged machines, calling themselves ghosts of the nebula. Even on Vera, where the seas had run red with defeat, hope surged anew. But war is never without cost. Thousands of resistance fighters were lost in the battle, their names carried only in whispers. Families on Earth wept for sons and daughters who would never return. The resolute dawn itself bore deep scars, its decks lined with the wounded and dying. Selene walked among them, her face unflinching, though her heart carried every scream, every name. She stood at the viewport after the battle, watching the wreckage drift through the nebula. Her officers gathered behind her, waiting for words of triumph. Instead, she spoke quietly. "This is only the beginning. We will win nothing easily. The Dominion is vast, and we are few. Oh, but today we proved they can bleed. Tomorrow, we will. Make them remember what it means to fear." Her words were carried across the resistance networks. They did not ring with hollow glory, but with truth. It was truth that gave people strength. The Dominion's response was swift and merciless. Whole cities were purged in retaliation. Worlds burned not for rebellion, but for the possibility of rebellion. Crimson fleets swarmed the trade lanes, tightening their grip. The pyres grew taller, and the screams louder, but the galaxy no longer trembled in silence. Selena's rebellion had given them a voice, fire, a war. And though the Dominion thundered across the stars with all its fury, it could not silence the embers. Not anymore. The first great war had begun, and it would either forge freedom or burn the galaxy to ash. The fire of rebellion spread like lightning across the galaxy, but fire consumes as much as it illuminates. Every act of defiance brought not only hope, but also ruin. And with each passing cycle, Selene Arcturus felt the weight of ashes gathering on her soul. The First Great War had begun in triumph. Yet wars are not won in a single blaze. They stretch, grinding down all who fight. And the Dominion had centuries of endurance behind it. The retaliation came swift and merciless. On the mining world of Dareth, where workers had risen with makeshift weapons, Dominion warships descended. In silence, no demands, no trials, no mercy. When the Resistance scouts arrived days later, they found only glass. Entire cities melted into black plains, the ground still glowing with heat. 2 million voices silenced in an instant. The Dominion broadcasted the images across the networks, a warning etched in fire. This is the price of rebellion. Selene watched those transmissions in silence aboard the Resolute Dawn. Around her, officers clenched fists and cursed, but Selene stood motionless, her face carved from stone. Inside, though, a storm raged. Every child burned on Dareth, every mother turned to ash, their ghosts pressed against her chest like a weight she could never lift. But there was no time to grieve. The Resistance bled, not only from battles, but from within. Supplies ran thin. Weapons were scavenged from wreckage or stolen from Dominion stores. Ships were patched with plates from fallen comrades. Medical bays overflowed, but there were never enough doctors, never enough painkillers, never enough clean water for the wounded, and always the whispers. How long can we last? Selene answered not with promises, but with presence. She walked the decks of her ships, sitting beside the wounded, listening to their stories, holding their hands as they slipped into silence. She stood on outpost walls with sentries, looking out into the void with them, reminding them they were not alone. She carried every face in her memory, binding them into her will. Still, shadows deepened. The Dominion unleashed a new terror. The Oblivion engines, ships larger than cities, draped in crimson banners, each carrying weapons that could tear through planetary crust. They were not built to fight fleets. They were built to erase worlds. The first target was Chorus, a desert planet whose people had secretly funneled supplies to the Resistance. Selene gathered what ships she could to intercept, but she knew the truth. Her fleet was too small too. Fragile. The battle was chaos. Resistance frigates started like wasps, striking the great engine from all angles. The Dominion's escorts shredded them, crimson beams tearing through holes like paper. One by one, Selene's ships fell. She ordered retreats, regroupings, desperate charges. But the Oblivion engine pressed forward, unstoppable, in the end. The only choice was sacrifice. Commander Thalos, a veteran who had once sworn to Selene on Earth's scorched soil, turned. His ship, the Vigilant Star, straight into the engine's core. He broadcasted no speech, no farewell, only a quiet, steady voice. For Chorus. The explosion split the void with light, tearing through the engine's reactor. The monster ship shuddered, broke, and collapsed into a blackened husk. Chorus was saved, but at the cost of thousands aboard the Vigilant Star. When Selene returned to Chorus, the people hailed her fleet as saviors. But in her heart, she felt only the absence of Thalos's voice. The silence of the Vigilant Star. War became a ledger of sacrifices. On Graxus, entire factories of workers chose death rather than reveal hidden caches. Burned their own boats so Dominion soldiers could not use them.
Ow.
On Earth itself, families sent their children to the stars. Knowing they might never return, Selene felt each sacrifice like a blade. She kept a chamber on the Resolute Dawn where she etched names into steel plates, every fallen comrade. Every ship, every village destroyed. The walls grew heavier with each passing cycle, and still the plates kept coming. Yet even as grief mounted, the rebellion endured. Every sacrifice forged a chain of defiance stronger than fear. When one fleet burned, another rose. When one world fell, 3 more whispered rebellion. The Dominion's terror had turned into fuel for resistance. Still, Celine knew the war was changing her. Nights were restless, haunted by faces she could not save. In quiet moments, she wondered how much of herself would remain when the war was done, if it ever would be. Was she leading the galaxy to freedom, or only to endless graves? But when doubt threatened to consume her, she remembered Thalas's voice. For chorus. She remembered the children drawing stars in ash, the workers singing as they sabotaged their chains, the mothers who sent their sons and daughters with blessings instead of tears. And she remembered that hope, no matter how fragile, was still alive. The shadows of sacrifice stretched long across the galaxy. But in their darkness, embers still glowed, and Selene swore she would not let them die. The war had burned for years, consuming world after world in its fire. The galaxy was no longer a constellation of glittering jewels, but a scarred body, its veins blackened by smoke, its stars heavy with ghosts. And yet, despite the devastation, the Dominion had not crushed the rebellion. Selena Arcturus stood at the edge of a war unlike any the galaxy had ever known. The resistance was fractured, battered, half-starved, but alive. The Dominion, furious at its failure to extinguish them, revealed the ultimate weapon, the Eclipse Citadel. No one knew whether it was a ship, a station, or something older, dredged. From the dark before empires rose, it dwarfed even the Oblivion engines. A moon of metal and malice, rimmed with spines that pulsed crimson, and at its core, a void of swirling shadow where light itself seemed to die. Dominion broadcasts declared it the final dawn, the weapon that would bring the rebellion to its knees. The galaxy called it the final eclipse. For Selene, it was not merely another battle. It was the reckoning, the moment all sacrifices had led toward. If the Citadel fell, the Dominion would bleed beyond recovery. If it endured, the rebellion would collapse, and hope with it. But hope was fragile. The resistance had little left to give. Fleets were scattered, ships limped through void on failing engines, weapons caches nearly empty. Selene summoned what remained to the hidden base at Elithra, a hollow moon whose caverns echoed with the voices of soldiers too weary to sing, too stubborn to surrender. There she stood before them, the weight of every fallen comrade etched into her face. "This is not the end," she told them, her voice carrying through the caverns like steel. "This is the choice. Either we break here, and all we've bled for is ash, or we burn brighter than we ever have, and carve freedom from their shadow. The Dominion believes the eclipse will eclipse us. Let us show them the truth. We are the light that endures." Her words did not spark cheers. There was no strength left for celebration. But there was resolve, deep and quiet, like iron buried in stone. That was enough. The plan was madness. Selene knew it. The Citadel's defenses were vast. Layers of fleets, towers of artillery, legions of Dominion soldiers who would die before. Retreat. No ordinary assault could pierce it. But Selene had studied its design. Stolen fragments of data smuggled at the cost of entire cities. And she had seen its weakness, the void core, at its heart. The anomaly that devoured light also devoured stability. If breached, the Citadel would implode. To reach it would demand everything. A frontal assault to draw the Dominion's fleets, a strike team to breach the Citadel's outer defenses, and a final plunge into the heart of the core, knowing full. While none who entered would return, Selene did not assign that final task to anyone else. It was hers. The nights before the assault were restless. Selene walked the caverns of Elithra, passing sleeping soldiers, listening to their murmurs of home, of children, of lost loves. She stopped often, pressing a hand against the stone walls. Grounding herself in the weight of the galaxy she carried, she thought of Thalos, of the vigilant star, of the millions on Dareth, of every name etched in her chamber of steel. She whispered their names into the darkness, a litany of ghosts, promised them she would not falter. When dawn came, though dawn meant little in the hollow of a moon, the resistance gathered. Ships groaned awake, engines coughing, fire. Fighters painted old symbols on their hulls, stars, rivers, the names of fallen worlds. Soldiers kissed charms, prayed to gods long forbidden, or stood in silence, each one carrying the weight of destiny. Selene boarded the resolute Dawn, her flagship scarred but unyielding, led the fleet into the void. They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Dominion's fortress system. And there it was, the Eclipse Citadel looming in silence, its crimson spines stretching like the claws of a beast too vast for comprehension. Around it, the Dominion's fleets bristled, thousands of ships in perfect formation, waiting like predators scenting blood. Selene's fleet was a fraction of their number, a candle against a storm. But candles, she knew, could set fire to the world. The battle began in silence. For a moment, the two forces simply stared across the void. Then, with a flare of crimson, the Dominion opened fire. Light and darkness collided. Resistance ships darted like sparks, weaving through the storm of beams. Dominion cruisers shattered under desperate barrages. But for every one destroyed, 3 more pressed forward. Fighters danced in swarms, turning space into a web of fire and wreckage. The void itself seemed to scream. Selene stood at the heart of it, her voice a calm tide amidst chaos. Hold the line, break their wings. Every second we live is another second closer to their death. Behind her words, the plan unfolded. A squadron of stealth ships, hidden in the storm, pierced through the Dominion's flank. They carried the strike team, bound for the Citadel itself. As the Resistance fleet bled and burned, those few ships vanished into the shadow of the eclipse. Selene watched them go, knowing she would join them soon. The final eclipse had begun. The galaxy trembled. At the edge of its fate, the void swallowed the strike team as they slipped beneath the Eclipse Citadel's shadow. Around them, the galaxy burned. Resistance fleets shattered against the Dominion's wall of fire, crimson banners blazing amidst the storm. Every explosion, every dying signal was another sacrifice buying seconds. Seconds for Selene. The resolute Dawn plunged forward, scarred but unbroken, its decks trembling with each impact. Selene stood firm on the command deck, watching the Citadel grow ever larger in the viewport. It was no mere station. It was a wound in the galaxy, a scar of iron and shadow where light itself died. The closer they came, the heavier the air felt, as though the void pressed against their chests, trying to smother the breath of hope. Breach point in sight, her helmsman called. His voice shook, not from fear but awe. Selene nodded once. "Take us in." The Citadel's spines came alive. Crimson lances flared, slicing through escorts, tearing fighters into embers. The resolute Dawn shuddered under the barrage, hull plates cracking, alarms shrieking. Still, it pressed forward, cutting through the storm like a wounded beast refusing to die. At the last moment, Selene gave the order. All power to forward shields, ram the breach. Engines screamed. The ship surged, tearing through the citadels. Outer plating, in a bloom of fire and debris. The resolute Dawn broke apart in the impact, its proud frame collapsing into twisted wreckage. But in its death, it carved a wound wide enough for Selene and her strike team to enter. They plunged into the heart of the eclipse. The interior was a cathedral of nightmares. Vast chambers stretched into darkness, lit by pulsing veins of crimson. Machinery throbbed like organs. Shadows slithered across walls, moving against the light. And at the center of it all was the core, a swirling abyss, a sphere of living darkness that devoured all it touched. The phantom of the void awaited them there. It emerged from the core, like smoke taking shape, a figure of shifting shadow. With horns that split the air like blades, eyes burning red with hunger, its voice was not sound, but a pressure inside their minds, cold and endless. You dare defy eternity? You dare challenge the void? You are sparks, I am night. I am the silence that waits when your fires die. The strike team faltered, weapons shaking in their hands. But Selene stepped forward, her gaze unflinching. You are not eternity, she said. You are emptiness. Okay, and emptiness cannot rule. She raised her weapon. The battle was chaos. Crimson beams slashing, resistance fire tearing through. The chamber, shadows splitting soldiers apart. One by one, her comrades fell, swallowed by the void. Yet each death carried them closer to the core, closer to the heart of the citadel. Celine fought like fire incarnate, her blade glowing with stolen Dominion energy, her rifle spitting defiance into the darkness. Still, the phantom loomed, unending. Each wound knitting back together, each shadow reborn. At last, only Celine remained. She stood at the edge of the abyss, her body broken, her armor scorched, her breath ragged. The phantom towered before her, laughing in silence. "You cannot kill the void. You are alone." Celine's voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of galaxies. "No, I am not alone. I carry them all." She pressed her hand to the detonator on her chest. The last charge, the last hope. It would ignite the core, collapse the citadel, and with it, herself. The phantom lunged, but too late. Selena's final words echoed through the void, for the dawn. The explosion tore through the citadel. The void core buckled, imploded, and consumed itself in a storm of collapsing light. The phantom screamed, a soundless cry that shook the stars before being ripped into nothing. The eclipsed citadel shattered, its fragments scattering across space like dying embers. Across the galaxy, Dominion fleets faltered. Their banners flickered, their formations broke. Without the citadel, without the phantom, the spell of fear shattered. The Dominion crumbled, its armies retreating, its iron grip slipping away. And in the silence that followed, dawn returned to the galaxy. On Earth, bells rang. On Chorus, children painted suns in the sand. On Graxus, workers lit fires not of war, but of celebration. Celine's name was carried on every breath, not as a soldier, not as a commander, but as the flame that had kept them alive. But Celine herself was gone. Her body never recovered, her voice forever silent. Only the echo of her sacrifice remained, a light burning brighter than the void. Generations later, storytellers would gather beneath alien skies and speak of the woman who faced the phantom, of the void and gave everything. They would whisper her name with reverence, and in their whispers, the stars themselves seemed to listen. For though shadows had stretched long, though the void had threatened to swallow all, dawn had come, and it endured.